let's talk about caregiver martyr syndrome. So this training, I think today has the potential to ruffle some feathers. And I hope you know that I'm giving you this information purely based out of kindness. I do not want to seem like I'm being mean to anybody, but I think it's important that we're self-aware. And sometimes when we get in these caregiving situations, we don't have time to sit and think about ourselves or think about why we do what we do or how we feel what we feel. And so this training is not something that's going to hopefully make you feel accused in any way, shape, or form, but it is an invitation to do some self-reflection, okay? Because the better we know ourselves, the better we can care for ourselves. And the better we care for ourselves, the better we can care for the loved ones in our care, right? So all of that to say, I hope this inspires some introspection. And if you have questions or comments as I go through this training, please put them in the chat. Or if you'd rather just unmute and talk about it. We will have time for that afterwards. I will stop the recording during that portion so that we can have a conversation and we can maintain everyone's privacy, because these trainings are recorded and they're put on YouTube. So unless you want to be on YouTube, you're more than happy to hop on camera and talk with me. But most of you, I'm sure, probably are not that excited about that. So if you want to stick around after the training and have a conversation, I'm really excited and more than happy to have that space open for you. So our agenda for today, we're going to try to understand martyr syndrome, and then we're going to go through martyr syndrome and a few other things that look very similar to martyr syndrome, such as people pleasing, having a victim mentality, a savior complex, okay? And then we're going to talk about the negative implications of those. And we're going to end on how you recognize and address martyr syndrome. So let's go ahead and get into the information. What is martyr syndrome? So in family caregivers, martyr syndrome can manifest as a pattern, a behavioral pattern, where you are consistently putting the needs of your care recipient above your own, which we know is kind of par for the course, right? But it's when it's at the detriment of your own well-being, okay? So martyr syndrome is a recipe for burnout, okay? So feelings of resentment, burnout, maybe even being taken for granted, right? Those are feelings that you can feel. Now, of course, you can feel those things and not have martyr syndrome, okay? So I want you to be very clear about that. But if you have if you're a caregiver with martyr syndrome, you're probably going to have a difficult time setting boundaries. Maybe you're going to feel guilty when you prioritize your own needs over somebody else's. And it's important to recognize that these patterns are emerging, okay? And you might be in a space where you have to put their needs above your own, right? But again, the key is doing it in a way that you go back later when you have time to care for yourself, okay? So you're not just running full blast all the time, okay? So you really need to make sure you have support and have that time away to refuel yourself, okay? So that's kind of martyr syndrome in a nutshell. Just really always, it's a pattern of behavior where you are always attending to somebody else and never to yourself, okay? So that's the baseline. But there's more to it than that. So we'll go ahead and get into a little bit more. So what are the symptoms of martyr syndrome? Okay, so that is you have a specific belief that you're the only one who can care for your loved one. And this is going to cause problems when you need to do self-care, right? When you need to have a break, because if you feel like you're the only one who can do it, then you will not let anybody else do it, right? Isolation. So maybe you're isolating yourself and your loved one from people who could help, again, because you have that belief that no one can do it but me, right? And, there probably are a lot of things that you do better than other people, right? Just because this is what you've been doing, right? And you understand your loved one and you understand their needs. And so you're going to be the one who does it the best, okay? But that doesn't mean that you're the only one capable, okay? But if you have this idea that you're the only one who can, you're going to isolate yourself from anyone that could potentially help you, right? Next, sacrifice. So again, you're sacrificing your own needs and your own well-being for that of your loved one. And I'm not saying that that's not just what has to happen sometimes, but again, this is a pattern where you're always doing this and you're never shifting. Okay. And then some emotional symptoms, anger, guilt, loneliness, resentment, sadness. Okay. Now, feeling those feelings in and of themselves doesn't mean you have the syndrome, but they are symptoms of the syndrome. Okay. There are physical symptoms. Maybe you're excessively tired, right? Headaches, muscle tension, stomach problems. This is because you have allowed yourself to get in a space where you have no reprieve, right? You have no breaks. And so your body is responding to all that stress and all that physical, mental, and emotional exertion. And psychological problems. So, of course, this can definitely lead to anxiety and depression. So some signs of Martyr syndrome, feeling punished for trying to help, right? If you're trying to do something and it's not being received the way that you want it to be received, and then you feel like you're being punished for that. Feeling like nothing that you do is right. You always seem to be suffering, right? Or you see yourself as always suffering. Doing things for people even though you don't feel appreciated. Now, of course, feeling appreciated shouldn't be your whole reason to do what you do. But if that is, if you're constantly pushing yourself past your boundaries, and then you don't feel appreciated for that effort, that could be a sign that maybe you don't need to push that hard, right? And then regularly accepting responsibilities that aren't necessarily required for you, okay? Now, this is where I'm going to start getting into some other things that sound very similar to Martyr syndrome. So you're going to see some overlap here. You may not see yourself in any of these things. You may see a little bit of yourself in all of them. Maybe when I start going through these, you start thinking of other people in your family or in your space, in your caregiving space that, oh, that's my brother, or that's my sibling, or that's my aunt, right? So just be mindful of these symptoms and how they may overlap. I'm not trying to diagnose anybody or have you self-diagnose. Again, it's just an awareness, okay? So what is the difference between martyr complex and people-pleasing behavior, okay? So they share a lot of the same traits, but there are some key differences between the two. So people who have martyr syndrome feel like they have no other choice but to serve other people, even at their own expense, okay? So this isn't just having a servant's heart. This isn't just about being an empathetic person or a sympathetic person or a compassionate person. This is where you feel like you don't have any other choice, okay? And there may be situations where you don't have a choice, right? Your caregiving situation happened because there was no one else, right? But when you feel like you have no choice to serve other people to the extent that you're doing it, to where you're not investing back into yourself. Okay, so it's an extreme. People with martyr syndrome, they may feel helpless and maybe act like a victim of other people's demands. And they might have unrealistic values, lack self-care, and do everything themselves. Okay. And people pleasing, you may put other people's needs before your own and feel resentful because you haven't been able to address your own needs. You have a lot of unmet needs. People pleasers often have poor boundaries and they struggle to say no. And they maybe need a lot of approval from other people, which is why they're always sacrificing so that they can have a favorable response from other people, right? And people pleasers might also lie to themselves about what's important to them and what will make them happy, right? Oh, I don't really need that. I don't really want that. Somebody else, what they want is more important than what I want, right? So it's important to recognize that both people pleasers and people with martyr syndrome, they really do have a really strong desire to help other people. But again, it's at the detriment of their own well-being. So people pleasers will often seek validation and approval from others by always saying yes to avoid conflict, right? While those who have martyr syndrome may actively seek out suffering and self-sacrifice as a way to feel virtuous or morally superior, okay? So one of them is I'm avoiding conflict, so I'm going to say yes to everything, even if I'm not comfortable with it. And somebody with martyr syndrome is going to actively seek out spaces where they can self-sacrifice, where they can go above and beyond because they want to feel morally superior to somebody else or virtuous, right? So both of these behaviors obviously can be very detrimental to your mental health and your emotional health. And so it's really important that if you are exhibiting some of these traits, to just loop back around, prioritize your well-being, establish healthy boundaries, okay? And that's not just with others, but with yourself, okay? Because a lot of times it's not other people putting these demands on us, it can be us demanding these things from ourselves, right? We have those unrealistic values or expectations on what it's supposed to look like. And so you burn yourself into the dirt to get to that space. Next one that sounds a lot like martyr syndrome is victim mentality. So a person who has victim mentality, they may perceive themselves as having no control, right? Negative events happen and they're going to blame everybody else for that circumstance. So on the other hand, individuals with martyr syndrome, they may seek praise through serving others and may exhibit a self-sacrificing nature, okay? So victim mentality is the choice to remain stuck in a mindset where you believe you have no power, no control, or no responsibility for your life and how it has turned out. And that mindset, of course, is going to distort your perspective. It can make you feel like the odds are always against you, and the world is conspiring to prevent you from succeeding, right? There's always some external reason why you aren't where you are in your life. And that is really going to cause your mental health to take a hit. And it can really leave you stagnant when you have goals you want to achieve, but always feeling like, you know, you've lost before you even begun, okay? And so I think it's important to pause here and make it known that there is a difference between actually being a victim of something and having victim mentality. So the key distinction is the ability to assign responsibility appropriately, right? So when someone has a victim mentality, they're often going to refuse to take any responsibility for their part in the problem, okay? Everything is everyone else's fault and they have no role in it. And I'm sure when I say that, there's probably several of you who a certain person comes to mind, right? And maybe it's you, maybe it's somebody in your extended space, but I think we all know somebody like this, right? And on the other hand, being an actual victim of something usually involves a clear violation of boundaries, right? So we need to know that situations like abuse or sexual assault, things like that, it's never the fault of the victim, okay? So the line is drawn where there's this consistent pattern of someone being able to or unable to take accountability for their actions. But if you can pinpoint specific events that contribute to your feeling of resentment or hurt, that's probably a pretty appropriate response, right? But if you have a global perception of the world being against you, you more than likely have a victim mentality, okay? So some common traits of people who have victim mentality. There's actually a diagnosis called victim complex. And so not everybody who has a victim mentality is going to have this diagnosis, but these people tend to dwell on every trauma, every crisis, every disease they've ever experienced, especially if it was back in their childhood, right? And they often believe that society as a whole is against them. And they kind of just passively accept this fate as perpetual victims, right? That's how they cope with their problems. So some common traits of people with victim complex, they refuse to take responsibility for dealing with their problems. This isn't my fault, it's not my responsibility, so why should I do anything, right? Never accepting blame for their problems. Always finding reasons why a suggestion or a suggested solution won't work. I have this person in my life who's very much like this, and I'm a very solution-oriented person. And so this person always wants to just gripe and they don't want to progress. And that is incredibly frustrating for me. Next, they hold grudges, they have a hard time forgiving, or they don't forgive at all, and they struggle to move on, right? It's like there's that offense happened or that perceived offense happened, and they stay in that space and they will not budge, right? They are perpetually offended. They are rarely assertive and find it hard to express their needs. And so this is where you might find a lot of passive aggressive behavior, right? They believe everyone's out to get them and they have a hard time trusting people. Being negative and pessimistic, always looking for the bad, even in the good, right? Yeah, this was a good day, but tomorrow's probably going to be terrible, right? They can't just take the good. They have to always kind of lob something terrible on top of it. And they're often very highly critical of other people, right? And they really have a hard time with long lasting friendships. Because again, if you have this victim mentality and you think that the world is against you and you can't trust anybody, that's going to be really, really difficult for you to not be critical to other people and have a friendship, right? Have these relationships where trust is a foundation, right? So if you have a hard time trusting, you're going to have a hard time building relationships. So psychologists will often say that people with a victim complex use these beliefs as a way to cope with or completely avoid life and its difficulties, right? So it's like it's going to end up bad anyway, so why even try? Or if they did something to cause a conflict, well, it wasn't my fault. They shouldn't have said what they said and they wouldn't have got what they got, right? And sometimes that's true, right? But the victim mentality, they're always looking for something to blame outside of themselves, okay? So the victim mindset dilutes human potential, according to Steve Maraboli. He's a behavioral scientist and an author. And he says, by not accepting personal responsibility for our circumstances, we greatly reduce our power to change them, right? It's like you're starting with this idea that you're not going to get anywhere. So why bother, right? So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So now we're going to touch very briefly on martyr syndrome versus savior complex, and I'll give you more symptoms in the next slide. So savior complex is also known as the Messiah complex or white knight syndrome. And this is a psychological phenomenon in which you believe that you have a mission or a duty to save, rescue, or fix other people's problems and suffering. Okay. And again, this is not a knock on being a compassionate person or wanting to help. But if you believe that it is your sole duty, your mission to save, rescue, or fix people, it could be creeping over into savior complex, okay? People with savior complex will often feel a strong need to help other people, even at the expense of their well-being, catching a trend here, and maybe believe that they're the only ones capable of assisting. So savior complex and martyr syndrome, they seem very, very similar. So some common characteristics, excessive caregiving, okay? So this means if you have savior complex, you tend to take on the role of a caregiver or a rescuer in relationships. Now, this doesn't necessarily pertain to you as an actual caregiver, like what you're doing. This could be a pattern that you have had your whole life, right? And it doesn't matter what relationship you're in, you're going to be the caregiver or the rescuer in that relationship, okay? You are going to feel responsible for meeting emotional, financial, physical needs of other people, okay? And you're the only one that can do it, okay? Next, over concern for the welfare of others. So people with this complex are often overly concerned with the welfare of other people, again, even at the expense or disregard of their own needs. And so we all know that selfless concern for the welfare and happiness of other people is a pretty positive quality, right? We want to have those things. But when the scales tip beyond healthy concern, it can become negative or even self-depreciating, right? Other people are viewed as more important than you, right? Rather than being equal. Next, the need for validation. So people with this complex will often seek validation and self-worth through their helping behaviors, right? You feel a sense of superiority or self-importance because you see yourself as the only one who can save other people, okay? So it's not that you're just wanting to be a helpful person. This is how you gauge how worthy of a person you are, is how helpful you can be to other people, okay? Next, again, difficulty setting boundaries, okay? This is kind of a thread that runs through all of these. So you might struggle to set healthy boundaries in relationships, become enmeshed in the problems and lives of other people, and that can lead to emotional exhaustion, right? If you're always in everybody else's business and always responsible for everybody else's feelings, it's going to deplete you, and you're not going to have the reserves for yourself. Neglect of self, again, focusing on helping other people and neglecting your own physical and emotional needs, that's going to result in burnout and resentment and even a sense of emptiness, right? Because you're pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring, right? Savior complex may result in a rescue or victim dynamic, and this can happen unconsciously, okay? You're going to seek out people who you perceive as helpless or who you perceive as needing rescue. And that is going to create a pattern of codependency in your relationships. Okay. So think about this external to your actual caregiving role, right? Are these maybe thought patterns or behaviors that have been always kind of part of you? And is it maybe out of balance or maybe showing up more in your caregiving role now that you have that space, right? Next one, overcommitment. Again, overcommitting yourself, taking on more responsibilities than you can handle, that's going to lead to stress, and that's going to lead to a reduced ability to actually help the people you're trying to help, right? Because you're so tired, you've committed to too many things, right? And then you add on top of that, the next one, you have a hard time accepting help, right? So ironically, people with a savior complex may have a hard time accepting help or support from other people because they see themselves as the primary caregiver or rescuers, okay? So again, none of this is inherently wrong, quote unquote, right? Because you are helping and you are providing care for somebody else, but we're focusing on the imbalance and the motivations behind it, right? Are you providing care because you love that person, you want the best for them, and you're the only one maybe in the space who can do it or has agreed to do it? Yes, maybe, probably yes. But then there's also another side of it. What are you getting out of it? Are you doing it because you need personal validation? Are you doing it because you feel like you're morally superior because you've sacrificed so much for somebody else, right? So it's not necessarily the actions, it's kind of the thought process behind it that can lead us to that depleted space, okay? And if you have these ideas that you're the only one who can, nobody can do like me, I'm not valid if I ask for help, you are going to drive yourself into burnout, okay? So these are warning signs. I hope you guys are paying attention. So some other actions and reactions that you might show if you have a savior complex. So you feel like other people's happiness or unhappiness is your fault. When someone doesn't show appreciation for what you've done, you get frustrated and resentful. Now, again, this can just be very valid human emotions, and I'm not trying to demonize any of that. You protect or shield others from the consequences of their actions, right? You don't have to feel bad. I'll feel bad for you, right? Let me fix it. Let me save you from these uncomfortable feelings for, by, whatever, taking the blame for yourself or, I'll handle it. I'll talk to somebody for you, right? And then you draw your self-worth and value exclusively or excessively from your ability to help someone else, okay? So this can be kind of tricky, especially if and when your caregiving journey comes to an end. Your whole sense of self and self-worth was wrapped up in what you're doing for another person. Then when you're not doing for that person, you feel lost. Or even if you're taking a break from caregiving, you're like, ooh, like there's an emptiness there because you're not doing for another person. Okay. So a lot of this is going to be internal. Externally, people may not see this as going on. It's all going to be internal. Why are you doing what you do? And is it helpful for you to do it with the mentality you're doing it with? Right. Only a few more slides. So you can kind of see how all of these are very similar, right? And there are negative implications to all of these. Most of them are going to be wearing yourself out, right? It may feel good to feel like you're the savior at the time, but you can't keep that up, right? Even our greatest heroes throughout history, throughout myth, throughout, spiritual, leaders and things like that, Mother Teresa, like all these people were very, very compassionate, helpful people. But even they took time to themselves to rest and recuperate and build relationships and identity outside of their caring, right? So we need that balance. So martyr syndrome, negative implications. Again, you're putting your needs or putting somebody else's needs before your own to an unhealthy extent. And that is going to lead to burnout and resentment. Self-sacrificing behavior may garner sympathy from other people initially, but over time, it can result in strained relationships, right? Other people may feel guilty or frustrated by the martyr's constant need to be the giver, right? I've had people in my life like this, where they would rather go without and be miserable than accept help and have a little bit of weight taken off their shoulders, right? Because it's their identity. If I'm not giving, if I'm not sacrificing, if I'm not burning myself down to nothing, I have no value. Okay? That's why it's a problem. Next, victim mentality. So this can trap you in a cycle of negativity, right? You're always going to perceive yourself as powerless. You're always going to blame some external circumstance for your hardship. And there are a lot of external circumstances that can be blamed for our hardships, okay? If anyone is paying any kind of attention to the world as an adult, you realize there's a lot of things that we can't control that impact us negatively, okay? But this is where you feel that you are powerless in this space and there's nothing good, or it's a personal attack on you, right? And so this obviously is a mindset that can prevent you from growing, right? Personal growth is going to be hindered because it discourages taking responsibility for your own actions and seeking proactive solutions, right? Because you would rather just sit and wallow in your victimhood than find a solution to get you up out of that space, right? And it can also kind of alienate you from other people because they were kind of tired of you being negative all the time, right? Well, have you tried this? Well, that won't work because, right? And so you're just constantly complaining and playing the victim, and that's exhausting to most people. Negative implications of people pleasing. So people pleasers will often go to great lengths to avoid conflict and seek approval from other people by sacrificing their needs and desires, right? So this can lead to a loss of your identity, right? It can lead to you neglecting your own values and your own goals because you're prioritizing somebody else's. And it can create unbalanced relationships, right? Where people pleasers are taken advantage of, or they're not truly valued. I don't know any people in my life who are people pleasers who did not, at least at some point, become paired up with somebody who knew they were a people pleaser and took advantage, manipulated, right? They're not going to tell me no, right? So it's up to you as that people pleaser to acknowledge that pattern of behavior and see what you can do to kind of learn how to set better boundaries and saying no. And then the negative implications of savior complex. So you may feel compelled to quote unquote rescue other people, believing that you know what's best for them, right? And that undermines the autonomy of the person you're trying to help, right? Or it can create a dependency that isn't necessary, right? Obviously, in a caregiving role, there is that dynamic, right? But just think of it as, are you doing this in other relationships, right? Were you behaving this way before your caregiving? Did you seek out a caregiving role for this purpose, right? And this obviously can lead to frustration and disappointment when the people you're trying to rescue don't conform to your expectations, or don't appreciate your efforts, right? Maybe they think you're just meddling, or why are you always trying to tell me what to do? Why do you always think that your decisions and your choices are better than mine, right? I don't need you to fix me, right? And it can come honestly, right? You could be trying to help somebody, but you're not allowing any space for them to be autonomous in that help, right? You're just saying, well, this is what you said you need, but this is what I think you need. And so I'm going to do what I think you need because it makes me feel good. Okay. So we can address these tendencies by fostering self-awareness, right? Taking a step back, thinking, why do I do this, right? Why are they frustrated with me? Let me look from the outside looking in and take an objective view, right? Why would they be feeling this way, right? Setting healthy boundaries, right? Saying no when you're depleted, saying no when it's not your responsibility and you already have enough and you're not going to overcommit yourself, right? And just try to take a balanced approach to your relationships, right? Relationships should be respectful of each person's autonomy, right? Each person's right to live the way that they want to live within reason. Obviously, I'm not saying let your 2-year-old, play with the stove because they want to. But, we're talking about, somebody who ignores another person's autonomy because they're trying to meet a need of being the savior, being the righteous helper, right? And so you're kind of suffocating somebody else's autonomy to make that happen for you. I hope that makes sense. So how does this impact your personal well-being and your relationships? Okay. So martyr syndrome is self-imposed suffering. Okay. Because you are refusing help, you're refusing rest, right? Because if you're not pouring your cup completely out on somebody else, you don't feel like you have any internal value. Okay. So this is self-imposed suffering, and that's going to lead to chronic stress, anxiety, depression, right? All those fun things, right? And that constant neglect of self-care, that's going to weaken your immune system. We all know that. And that's going to make you sicker, right? There's a lot of people who get in a caregiving role and their health declines. Sometimes to death, right? Sometimes people who are caregivers pass before their loved one because they stop taking care of themselves, because now their role is to focus 100% on somebody else, right? Victim mentality. So this mindset obviously is going to lead to feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, right? And that is, the bread and butter of depression and anxiety, right? You can't change anything. Nothing's going to get better. I'm hopeless. Things are hopeless. I'm helpless. I have no power or control in this scenario, right? And so that's going to hinder your personal growth and your development, right? You're going to struggle to take responsibility for your own actions and decisions. And so you're just, waiting for something bad to happen to you every day, all day. And I'm going to tell you, if you're looking for it, you're going to find it, right? You're going to find something to complain about if you're looking for it. And then people pleasing, right? This obviously something we talk about a lot in the caregiving world. That's going to lead to a loss of your personal identity, right? Because you're going to suppress your true feelings and your true desires to avoid conflict with other people, right? Well, I'll just do it because I don't want to hear them. I don't want to argue, so I'm just going to suck it up and I'm going to do it, right? That's people pleasing. Most people pleasers are not enthusiastic about people pleasing. It's just kind of like, okay, fine. I'll avoid the conflict and do the thing I don't want to do, right? And over time, that can result in low self-esteem. And again, resentment, burnout, right? Because you're trying to meet unrealistic expectations of other people, okay? And then savior complex. So this can lead to codependent relationships. So codependent relationships are basically where the person you are saving, quote unquote, is now dependent on you, right? They have outsourced their autonomy to you. And you as the savior, your whole identity is wrapped up in how helpless another person is, okay? So that codependency is where you're both siphoning value from one another in a very distorted relationship or imbalanced relationship, okay? So you may have an overwhelming sense of responsibility for another person's problems, right? Well, if Janet's not happy, I'm not happy, right? I just say Janet's my grandma's name. She's like the generic name that always pops up in my head. And that stress of really like trying to fix somebody all the time, that can be really, really anxiety producing, right? That can be exhausting, emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting, okay? Because it's not sustainable, because it's not reciprocal, okay? The energy flow is, congested, right? So these are patterns that create cycles of negative thoughts and emotions, and they can erode your self-esteem. They can erode your sense of personal satisfaction, right? So we address these issues by self-reflecting, okay? Sitting with ourselves, trying to figure out the pattern, right? Setting healthy boundaries, and if you need help with that, in some cases, seeking professional help, right? Like a counselor or social worker or therapist, because they're going to be able to take an outside looking in perspective, right? And we have the training to say like, hey, this is, codependent, or this is not serving you in any way, right? And so it's always good to say, if you can't take these steps and do that self-reflection and you don't know how to set boundaries, talk to somebody who does, and they can help you, okay? Last slide. So addressing martyr syndrome in all of these, I think this is good for all of the things I talked about: victim mentality, savior complex, all that. It's usually not just one thing, right? It's got to be a multifaceted approach, and it's going to focus on helping you recognize and modify your self-sacrificing behaviors, okay? And some of us may not realize that this is what we're doing. Some of us may think, well, this is just what caregiving is, right? Yes and no. There's got to be balance, okay? And if you are the primary caregiver, there's probably not anybody who's going to step into your world, into your mind, and say you're doing too much, you need to take a step back, right? Or your values are skewed, your reason, your motivation for this is skewed, because a lot of it's just internal, and so people can't read your mind, right? So you're going to have to be self-aware. So reflect on your behaviors and your motivations. Journaling, therapy, right? That can help you understand why you feel compelled to sacrifice yourself for other people, right? And recognize that those patterns might not be healthy. And I'm not advocating that you stop taking care of people. I'm just saying, if you're doing it in a way that's unbalanced and it leaves you feeling anxious, depressed, depleted, resentful, there needs to be a shift in some way, right? Setting healthy boundaries, right? It's important to establish clear boundaries with people. And that's not just by saying no, okay? It's by saying, hey, I can do this much. Can you take on the rest? Or I'm going to do this job and I'm not going to concern myself with external things that aren't my responsibility, right? So people with martyr syndrome often feel guilty for saying no, but learning to set limits is crucial for your well-being, okay? Prioritizing self-care, okay? It is not a luxury. It is necessary for you to pour back into yourself, right? So hobbies, regular relaxation, making sure your physical health, right? Are you drinking your water? Are you getting nutritious food? Are you seeing your friends and family, right? That's self-care. Prioritizing that is going to prevent a lot of this over self-sacrificing, where you end up giving, and then you're depleted, okay? Developing assertiveness skills is also very helpful. So learning to express your needs and desires openly and confidently, and not apologizing for it, right? I need more sleep. I need more rest. I need more time away. That can be very, very helpful, okay? You can go through assertiveness training to help empower yourself to communicate more effectively without feeling guilty or selfish, okay? So there are professionals who do that. Maybe you just got a really good friend who's been waiting to say these things to you, and you're like, how can I be more like you? Tell me how I can do that, right? And then, of course, professional help, right? Therapy, things like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT can be really helpful in addressing some of these underlying issues, right? And a therapist can provide that personalized strategy for you to help to kind of change some of those distorted thought patterns, right? That if I'm not doing for somebody else, I have no value, right? That's a cognitive distortion. That's what they call stinking thinking, right? And then foster supportive relationships. Okay, so building and maintaining relationships with people who respect your boundaries and who support your growth, who are cheering you on, right? Those are very, very important relationships to have. Positive social connections reinforce healthy behavior changes. Okay. Now, there are going to be people in your life that when you start saying no, when you start setting boundaries, when you start pulling away from things that you don't have to do and investing in yourself, there's going to be those who are going to call you, selfish or lazy or try to make you feel guilty, right? That's why it's important to have people on your corner who are supporting those changes for you to kind of counteract that. Okay. And if you have no one else in your life that can do those things for you, call me. Okay. I am very good at empowering people to take care of themselves. That's literally what I get paid to do. So when you address martyr syndrome or victim mentality or people pleasing or any of these things, addressing them with compassion and understanding, okay, that's going to help you to balance your like altruistic tendencies, like your tendencies to be helpful and to be kind and compassionate with self-care, okay? Because if you don't allow yourself that balance, you're basically reserving your spot in resentment land, right? Table of one. And so making sure there's that balance and being compassionate to yourself as you learn a new pattern, that's what's going to help lead to a more healthy and more fulfilling life for you and the people you're caring for. Okay. So this is my contact information, my email address, and my phone number. So if you need to contact me for any reason, of course, within reason, don't call me, ask me how to fry chicken or something like that, because I won't have the answer. But related to this or stress, or if you need resources, please reach out to me. If you want to schedule a care chat with me, I'm more than happy to do that with you. If you are looking for mental health resources, reach out to me and I will find that for you as well. Not only do we have the Caregiver Wellness Initiative, which gives stipends to pay a therapist if you have one that you want to use, but we also have an in-house therapist, Kendra, who is taking clients, and our services are free to you. If you have insurance, we'll bill it, but if you don't, it's just a service that we provide. So that's an option as well. So take advantage of reaching out. Don't feel like you can't, because that's what we're here for.